Mary Fallon from Oklahoma, Congressional 5th District, and I am very proud today to be able to stand here with my colleagues to ask the President to appeal the ruling of this judge, to stand up and fight for our freedoms, to have religious freedom. As was previously mentioned, our nation has not ever tried to establish one religion for our nation, but to give us the freedom of religion, to be able to express our opinions. It's interesting that we open prayer every time we have an opening session. So we do believe in prayer as a nation. And one of the things that has made this nation great is that our founding fathers sought the guidance and the wisdom of God in the creation of our nation, certainly in our Constitution. And America has been blessed and been a great nation because we have sought God. But if we take God out of America, America will cease to be a great nation.
Roscoe Bartlett from Maryland. You know, the Declaration of Independence is said to be the promise and the Constitution the fulfillment. Todd Tiahrt mentioned one of the 4 explicit references in the Declaration of Independence to God. I'd like to note the other 3 because I think it's important. First paragraph, it says the laws of nature and of nature's God. And then near the end of the Declaration, it says it's appealing to the supreme judge of the world. I think that means prayer, doesn't it? That's how you appeal to God, through prayer. And at the very end of it, it says protection of divine providence. 4 specific references to God. I wonder if this judge would declare the Declaration of Independence unconstitutional.
You know, it's always an honor for someone, some of the younger members of Congress to know that we stand on the shoulders of so many of those that have gone before and fought these battles in the past. But I have a picture behind my desk. It's called the Parrot Valley Forge, and it's a picture of George Washington standing in front of a large blue roan stallion on his knees praying. And the story goes that Isaac Potts came up, a Quaker, and heard George Washington praying. And he went home and told his wife, he said, you know, until today, I thought that being a soldier and a Christian were incompatible. But if George Washington be not a man of God, then I'm mistaken. And still more mistaken shall I be if he does not use this man to do something great for this country. We have the most profound heritage as a people. As has been said earlier, our Constitution and our Declaration are replete with the clear example that we are to allow the people of this country to pray. And it's always astonishing to me that when you look at the Declaration, it says, you know, the whole essence of America is that we believe that there's this divine image, this imago Dei, stamped on every human heart. And that that's what makes people worth protecting their life and their freedom and their pursuit of their dreams. And if we miss that, then I'm afraid we miss it all. And I know there have been judges for a long time that have tried to dismiss God from public life. And my greatest fear is that someday he might go. And if he does, I'm not convinced that they will be satisfied with the result.
I'm Spencer Backus from the 6th District of Alabama. As a Republican, we sometimes have Lincoln Day celebrations, and of course our Democratic colleagues have Jefferson Jackson Day dinners. One thing that Thomas Jefferson, a Democrat, and Abraham Lincoln, a Republican president, agreed on is that if judges began to make the law, the American people would have lost their freedom. One said it would stand the Constitution on its head. That was Thomas Jefferson. Abraham Lincoln said the people will have ceased to govern themselves. That, I think, has happened this past week when a judge didn't interpret a law. He made a law. And it's a law that flies in the face of everything this country stands for and the historical record of our country, including many inscriptions in the very buildings we meet in today. Thank you.
Everyone you've heard from agrees that this federal court decision was misguided. It shows the importance of having someone in the White House who appoints good judges. This judge was appointed by Jimmy Carter. Need I say anything more? We have to make sure that President Obama does not send to the Supreme Court someone's name this summer who's of the same liberal bent as this federal judge is. And that's a battle we're going to have to fight as conservatives and as freedom-loving Americans. Thank you.
I'm Louis Gomert from East Texas, and what we see in Judge Crabb is absolute proof as to why there must be a National Day of Prayer. When a judge gets through an education such as she's had and remains as ignorant as she is of our history, where we came from, and what it means to take her oath as a judge, as a Chief Justice. I took the oaths. I took it when I was in the Army. I took it when I became in Congress. And what it means to uphold the Constitution is if you're a district judge, you don't rewrite things. You follow precedent. You follow the law as it is, or as the Supreme Court tells you it is. But now we got this activist judge, and when you operate from the vast ignorance that she does, then it becomes dangerous. And I'm sure she's got the best degrees on her wall and all, but she is ignorant of our history. And if you go back to the beginning, and I know Mike McIntyre mentioned Benjamin Franklin's speech there in the Constitutional Convention. Nearly 5 weeks, they hadn't accomplished anything. And that's when 80-year-old Benjamin Franklin, smart as ever, stood up and went through what he did. We've been here 5 weeks, accomplished virtually nothing. We got more no's than ayes. And then he said these words, "How is it, sir, we have not once thought of applying to the Father of lights to illuminate our understanding? In the beginning contest with Great Britain, we had daily prayer in this room." Now, most of the people, like Judge Crabb, has probably been taught that he was a deist, meaning that there's some force that created the universe and then just stepped back. His next words were this: "Our prayers, sir, were heard, and they were graciously answered." And that has followed throughout our history. In the rotunda, there's the painting of George Washington tendering his resignation. Most people don't know that at the end of that resignation, he had these words, and people were so moved they had them printed and distributed across the country. And keep in mind, that was an act that nobody had ever done before and nobody has ever done since. Win a revolution as head of the military and then walk away. Never happened before or since. But Washington said, "I now make it my earnest prayer," hopefully that doesn't offend Judge Crabb, "that God would have you in the state over which you preside in his holy protection." And he goes on and on to attain a brotherly affection and love for one another. But he finishes by saying, and finally, that he would most graciously be pleased to dispose us all to do justice, to love mercy, and to demean ourselves with that charity, humility, and pacific temper of mind, which were the characteristics of the divine author, for Judge Crabb, that's Jesus, the divine author of our blessed religion, and without an humble imitation of whose example in these things we can never hope to be a happy nation. That's how we got started. It is throughout our history. I've got a bill I filed all 3 of the terms I've been in that would require a plaque for people like Judge Crabb to read in Statuary Hall so she would know and people would know about the decades of church. Now, I had CRS confirm the facts, and when I first saw what they sent back, I thought, uh-oh, they said there's a difference between Jefferson and Madison. They said, yeah, there's a difference between Jefferson attending church in the Capitol and Madison, because Jefferson normally preferred to ride a horse, and Madison went in a carriage drawn by 4 horses. Jefferson even brought the Marine Band to play the hymns in the church. So he had a little different idea of the term separation of church and state, which he himself coined. We have a history that is incredible. And bless her heart, I'd be interested to know whether Judge Crabb begins each session with a prayer, as most federal judges do, that says, "God save this honorable court." That's a prayer. And for her sake, I hope he does.
I'm Gary Miller from California's 42nd Congressional District. Just last month, for the first time in 130 years, we had a worship service in the Capitol Rotunda. And it was an honor to be there. We prayed. We quoted prayers from those who came before us. To think that a judge would rule that you cannot have a day of prayer when members of Congress met in the Capitol to have a worship service and to pray to God. And there were people standing outside who wanted to come in to be part of our service, and I wish they really could have if we could have had the room for them. But if you look at what was said about our founding fathers, even when we had the Great Civil War in this country, you had generals of both sides praying to God to do the right thing. Patton maybe didn't use the best words when he fought in World War II, but even Patton had prayers written for him to recite before he put men and women into battle, to risk their lives for this great country. And to have a judge make a decision like this is just unreasonable, and I believe unconstitutional. Each one of us Most of us, I think, go back to our districts each weekend and we go to church. Good people pray for us, our pastors pray for us, they pray for this country. And to think that they can be doing that for the interest of this nation and for our benefit, and we can't even recognize that there should be a day, not mandating that you pray, but a day set aside for prayer of good Americans or good Christians in this country want to come together to do that is unconstitutional. And I'm really honored to be here with my colleagues who are like-minded and believe that God plays a huge part in this country, a tremendous part in our lives, and the concept that we cannot honor him on a day and pray to him is absolutely unreasonable.
Thank you all for your patience. We just have a few more speakers, but as you can see, this is a very passionate issue for many of our members, and we wanted you to hear directly from them. We're joined today by a number of different organizations. A few of them would like to make about 30 seconds of remarks to you. We have here today the American Association of Christian Schools, Glow International, Capitol Hill Prayer Partners, Liberty Counsel, and also the individuals who fought this litigation wrote an amicus brief on behalf of members of Congress, the American Center for Law and Justice, and I'd like for Jordan Sekulow if he would come up here and offer some brief remarks. Jordan.
I first want to thank Congressman Forbes as well as Congressman McIntyre for leading the charge in the Congressional Prayer Caucus to put together a team, a bipartisan team of members of Congress to stand with the American Center for Law and Justice. These congressmen allowed us to represent them in the district court, and we will continue, they will continue to be with us as we continue to aggressively defend the National Day of Prayer in the Circuit Court of Appeals. I'd just like to make a couple comments because the members of Congress covered everything so well. First, we call on the administration not just to defend the National Day of Prayer and to appeal this decision, but to do so aggressively. Don't go into court and start conceding things. They have that ability. Let's not forget that. There's been a change, and there's new leadership at the head of the Department of Justice. Second, I encourage the members of the media to look into the Freedom from Religion Foundation who brought this suit. May be interesting to find out the way they raise their donations and money is encouraging people to purchase a Bible warning label with the skull and crossbones on it that they say, warning, literal belief in this book may endanger your health, and they encourage people to place them on the inside of Gideon's Bibles. They also have a theme song called Nothing Fails Like Prayer. This is not the ACLU. It's not even Americans United for Separation of Church and State. It's a group that has a true hatred of those with any religious belief, and specifically those who have a Judeo-Christian heritage belief. So again, I want to thank the members of Congress who have stood with the American Center for Law and Justice and allowed us to take this case forward. We will be, regardless of what our government does, aggressively defending the National Day of Prayer in the Circuit Court of Appeals. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. We also have a representative from Focus on the Family, Tim Gagline. Tim? Is Tim here? Tim Lee? Okay. Also for FRC Action, Tom McCluskey. Tom?
Well, for those who don't believe in God, we just had over a dozen congressmen speak in under 40 minutes, so he certainly has a hand in the roles of Congress. And faith has permeated, as has been pointed out repeatedly today, faith has permeated all the acts of Congress, everything from George Washington's Thanksgiving Proclamation in 1789 to the church service that they had before the health care vote, where opponents and proponents of the health care bill got together and prayed together. And I hear it was inspirational not only to the members, but it was inspirational to me who was working hard on the bill. It also showed me that God doesn't always answer everybody's prayers in the way that you want him to, but it showed that God has a hand in the nation's business. And that is one reason why, as Jordan Sekulow said, the White House has to defend this strongly, as strong as our founding fathers would have, and also why we have to be careful of who gets on the bench, because they more and more are the ones deciding what kind of faith we can have in the public square. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And representative from Concerned Women for America, Penny Nance, who's their Chief Executive Officer. Penny.
Thank you. I'm here today representing our 500,000 members of Concerned Women for America, and you've heard a lot about the historical underpinnings and the foundation of prayer in our country. I just wanted to say something about the practical reality. We are in trouble in this nation. The divorce rate is 60% higher than it was in the 1960s. A child is abused every 10 minutes. We have 800,000 people trafficked in sex trafficking all over the world, and between 15 and 17,000 of those are brought into this country. I could go on and on and on. From a practical standpoint, the president needs to understand, if he cares about hope, this is where hope lives. This is what hope is about. Men and women of faith, you heard from both political parties saying they join together on a regular basis and come before God with pure hearts, looking for solutions. This is the reason why that it makes sense for the White House to vigorously defend the ability for us to continue to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. We also have from the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, Dr. Barrett Duke, who's the Vice President of Public Policy. Barrett.
Congressman, thank you for your leadership for the prayer caucus as well. We really appreciate it. We are certainly in need of prayer. At every point in this nation's history, we've been in need of prayer, and that's no different today. We appreciate the fact that Judge Crabb is concerned that the government might be establishing religion. As Baptists, we're some of the most distrustful of all people of faith that government might do something that would interfere with religious practice. And yet, interestingly, it was a Baptist evangelist by the name of John Leland who actually persuaded James Madison to add religious protections to the U.S. Constitution. James Madison met with John Leland and agreed to introduce an amendment that would assure that government would not establish religion or interfere with religion, and that language becomes the very first language of the very first amendment to the United States Constitution. So we certainly agree with the need to keep government out of religion. And yet, you would be hard-pressed to find very many Baptists who actually believe that the day of prayer establishes religion. We don't believe, the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of Baptists do not believe that the National Day of Prayer constitutes the establishment of religion in this country. You just have to read the law and understand, as is always pointed out, that all the president is called on to do is to appoint a day in which the people may pray. It doesn't coerce them to pray. It doesn't tell them the kind of prayer to make. It simply asks them to come together in whatever way they choose to in a voluntary nature, if they want to. If they don't want to, that's fine as well, but it asks them to come before in their various religious environments and pray if they choose to do so. And we are deeply offended by the fact that this judge would decide that the National Day of Prayer actually establishes religion. Now, I've read Judge Crabb's opinion. She has an answer for practically everything and every possibility, but I think her understanding of the establishment of religion exceeds the Founding Fathers' understanding of what that means. In fact, she seems to be more concerned with the possibility that an atheist might be offended by somebody being called to prayer than anything else. And as you've noted, by that standard, we would have to say that our founding documents reference to nature's God and our Creator would themselves have to be determined to be an unconstitutional establishment of religion. Obviously, our founding fathers understood and appreciated the important role faith plays in our nation. We are dependent on God. Our nation is absolutely dependent on God. We need God's blessing. We certainly need His blessing at this time, and our people should be encouraged to join together in prayer if they decide to do that. The law does not violate the Constitution's Establishment Clause. The decision by Judge Crabb must and certainly will be overturned. Only someone with an overly strict separationist view of the relationship between faith and government would consider the law to be unconstitutional. The Southern Baptist Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission will be actively engaged in the judicial repudiation of this deeply flawed opinion. And may God bless America.
Thank you, Barrett. Now we have two speakers left, and I'm going to just continue to pray that we can get that in 30 seconds each so we can wrap up. The Traditional Values Coalition, Reverend Lou Shelton. Lou?
Thank you, Randy, and I'm commending you in this prayer caucus that you have. When America was founded, it was founded upon prayer. All you have to do is walk into the rotunda of the Capitol, turn, face the door, and there you see that first painting. Of all of those early pilgrims on the Stillwell boat that later started to leak, so they had to come back with it, they're on their knees, and the great artist draws the largest object in the painting is the Bible as they are praying and seeking God's will. That is the essence of America, all the way up to the time of George Washington. And finally, when the Congress moved from Philadelphia down to Washington, D.C., to what was the early origins of this great building and institution we are in, they had a tradition, and it was not to adjourn when they ended their work of that week, but to recess. And what did they recess to? They recessed to Sunday morning prayer and praise. That's history. To deny history is to try and think you can empty the ocean with a teacup. We must be doing something right for this organization that Jordan so vividly described has as its motive and what have you. Washington said it all when he left office. He said, of all the dispositions and habits, and there are many of them, that lead to political prosperity, and we all want political prosperity, of all the dispositions and habits that lead to political prosperity, there's two indispensable supports. What are they? Religion and morality. And God save America through our prayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. And from Faith in Action, Rob Shank. Rob?
Thank you. I wonder if someone would be so kind to bring that poster on the table up here, the words of Abraham Lincoln. Our national motto, Rob Shank, by the way, S-C-H-E-N-C-K, Faith and Action. Our national motto is, in God we trust. The President of the United States swears his oath of office, so help me God. The Congress begins every session with a prayer to God. The Supreme Court of the United States announces with every sitting, God save the United States and this honorable court. But perhaps the most eloquent words ever spoken on a national day of prayer are these words of Abraham Lincoln during the most intense crisis our nation has ever faced. And whereas it is the duty of nations as well as of men to own their dependence upon the overruling power of God, to confess their sins and transgressions in humble sorrow, yet with assured hope that that genuine repentance will lead to mercy and pardon, and to recognize the sublime truth announced in the Holy Scriptures and proven by all history, that those nations only are blessed whose God is the Lord. This document is from the Library of Congress, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you all for your patience. If anyone has any questions, we're happy to try to respond to them now. I know you've been here a long time. Do you have any questions that anyone has? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Annette Banks, Religion News Service. In the judge's decision, she went on for a couple of pages listing what she considered examples of people feeling excluded by National Day of Prayer. I wonder if you have any response to that, because that's what people had said.
Yeah. First of all, I think if you take, if we ever go down the road of the First Amendment that says anytime anybody feels excluded in the United States, they aren't going to be able to speak. We're not going to, any of us are going to be able to speak at all. And I think it was important that our founding fathers believed very strongly that in the marketplace of ideas, truth would win out. They realized that you were going to have some people that didn't like what was being said in that marketplace of ideas, but they felt over time truth would work its way up if you had a marketplace. It's important to realize that people of faith aren't saying that you can't come in and you can't express whatever feelings you want in that marketplace. If you don't believe God exists, have at it. Go at it and participate in the marketplace. What we're talking about is not whether or not faith and religion should dominate the marketplace, whether they could control the marketplace. We're talking about whether they should have a seat at the table in the marketplace. And it was important that our founders, the Constitution, were so wise that, again, when they looked at the First Amendment, they didn't view it as a throttle to say we're going to exclude and put no trespassing signs up. What they viewed it as something that would open that door so that you could have more thoughts, more ideas in. And what this opinion basically does is to say when it comes to any action of government, you're going to have these no trespassing signs to the marketplace of ideas. With government reaching out into more and more parts of our lives and parts of our business, you're going to see more and more of those signs going up. I think it's dangerous for the country to say that we're not going to have those ideas just having a seat at the table. Anybody else? Question?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
appeals will go to the Seventh Circuit. Is there anything in that particular court of appeals that leads you to have hope that this decision will be overturned?
I've got a lot of hope. I think I see the hope in these members that were here, these groups that were here, the American people. You go look in their eyes, you go talk to them and ask them whether they want to reaffirm our national motto, "In God We Trust." And I think overwhelmingly they're going to cry out, "Yes, we do." And I have that hope. And I think if the Seventh Circuit decides that, they want to uphold this decision, we're going to move it up to the Supreme Court. And, I'm not downtrodden by this decision. I'm encouraged by it because I see the response we're going to have from millions of Americans across the country who say this judge is just wrong and this decision can't stand. Yes, sir.
One of the scheduled people to speak at the Day of Prayer is Franklin Graham of the Pentagon. There's been some controversy over his remarks over Islam. Do you think he should be allowed to speak at the Pentagon? And if he's not allowed to speak, how would that make
What are they afraid that Franklin Graham's going to say? I think, again, we're getting to the part in the country where what I want to do is try to exclude everybody from speaking if I disagree with what they're going to say or if I'm offended by what they're going to say. I can assure you of this. If we're going to apply that rule, we're going to have a lot of people who are not allowed to speak on the floor of the House of Representatives because I'm offended by what they say. But we don't want that. We want a marketplace of ideas. And I think to start saying that we're going to exclude people like Franklin Graham is taking us down the wrong road. But I'm going to leave that up to them to decide, but I hope they don't do that. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
So the official reaction to this is a House resolution?
Oh, no, we'll have a number of different things. But today, what I wanted to do is hear the voices of people who are crying out and saying this is wrong. And remember, these folks here, it's not just them. It's millions of people that they represent and groups they represent around America, all of whom would like to come in here today and be saying the exact same thing. They just can't logistically do that. I think the first thing that we want to do after that, though, is to make sure that we're going to pass a resolution, we hope, where the House of Representatives speaks with a voice and says that we don't think that this is unconstitutional. Third thing is we want to make sure that we're encouraging the President to appeal this decision, which I'm hopeful that he will. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he's going to do that because it's my understanding he's going forward with the proclamation anyway, which I applaud him for doing. But then the other thing, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think we can stay in this strategy anymore of just sitting back defensively and waiting until they pick their judges and pick their forms. I think we've got to carry this debate and this message around the country because in the marketplace of ideas, truth will win out, and I believe what we're talking about is true.
This continues down a legal route, and let's say, just for argument's sake, that you don't win in the Court of Appeals, you don't win in the Supreme Court, what then?
Well, first of all, I think that would be a tragedy for the United States. Secondly, I can't envision that happening because I don't want a lot of our founders turning over in their graves. And I think that's exactly what would happen. I think if you walk through the halls of this Congress, I think you can see the words on the walls. I think you can see the statutes. We can't bring them to life, but we can bring back to life the words. If you ask us today, why are members of Congress coming in here talking about faith and religion? We're not in the faith and religion business, but we're in the freedom and liberty business. And if we could bring in here one of the greatest architects of freedom that America's ever known, it'd be John Adams. And you know what he would do? He'd walk through those doors, he'd walk right up to this microphone, and here's what he'd say. He'd say, all these people over there, let's give them the benefit of their due, and let's say they're not politicians, let's say they're statesmen. He would say, statesmen can plan and speculate about liberty, but it's only faith and religion and morality that can birth the principles to secure it. That's what this is about. And when we begin to put those no trespassing signs up, we are strangling the very principles that people like Adams would cry out and say, that's what you need to establish freedom in America. That's why this is such an important issue to so many of these members. It's about freedom. It's about liberty.
Is there a constitutional amendment coming?
Oh, we'll cross each of these bridges as we get to them. But I'm optimistic that when you get a group of judges who really read this decision, they're going to say, what in the world is this judge doing, and how did they rule the way that they ruled? I can't comprehend them affirming this decision. So we're going to cross each of those meadows as we get to them. So, anybody else? If not, guys, thank you so much for being with us today.